Bubbly, bubbly. Bubbly, bubbly. Bubbly, bubbly.
Hey brothers and sisters, welcome back to the Behaviour Revolution, and it's that time of year again. The latter feasts have come upon us, the time of tabernacles. Wonderful time of the year, wonderful feasts. So once again, I want to rehash them all, bring them all up, look at the scriptures and really dissect them and go, how do we really observe these feasts today? How does Yahusha want his bride to observe these feasts? It's got to be simple, it's got to be affordable, it's got to be easy. That's it. Because people are crying out for deliverance. And if you're going to give them the message of deliverance, the good news, it's got to be easy, doesn't it? It's got to be bite-sized. You've got to have your little spiels and samples in bite-size so people can understand them, yeah? So let's go through this amazing study. This is just the introduction today. It's all about how to experience the feasts, yeah? So because they're supernatural. Everything Yahusha does in his body is now supernatural. So let's get into it. Yahusha's new covenant supernatural feasts. That's what they are. They're supernatural. You don't just be looking at the letter, the scripture, by itself. You've got to digest it, meditate on it, listen to Yahusha's voice, maybe do some study and go, listen to him and go, what do you want me to do today? What does this mean for me? Let's dive into it. Today, we start a series looking at the third and final and most marvelous of Yahusha's appointed times and seasons, the Feast of Tabernacles, often called Booths or Sukkoth, all right? So while there's several feasts at this time of year, 4 actually, but the overall time and season, we call it Tabernacles, yeah? Because everyone knows what a tabernacle is. Make it easy. Everyone knows what a tabernacle is, what Moses' tabernacle, David's tabernacle, Solomon's temple. Everyone knows what a tabernacle is. So let's make it easy for everybody. I don't use many Hebrew words anymore. We all understand that everything came from Hebrew. That's great. Look it up if you want to know things. If you want to go deeper, great. We don't use many Hebrew words because we're not in a Hebrew culture. We have to speak the language of the culture, the babbling lips, to get the truth out to people, yeah? Let's go on. This time, it's a feast which Yahusha's people seem to know or understand very little about. It's true. Or how to celebrate it today. But it turns out that this feast is alluded to by the prophets more than all the other feasts combined. This Feast of Tabernacles is referred to and alluded to by the prophets and others more than any of the other feasts combined. It was for the Israelite people the consummation and completion of their full agricultural year in service to their Elohim Yahuah. And it was the feast of all feasts. This time of the year that we're coming into in a couple of weeks is the feast of all feasts, the feast time of all feasts. It's the end of the year. Yeah, Passover represented more the beginning of the year, of their year. Tabernacles was the end of their year. So big celebrations. It was the feast of all feasts as far as the Hebrew mind was concerned. But more than that, it was an appointed time. It's not actually called a feast as such. In the Hebrew, it's Moedim, which is an appointed time. So I don't go around saying to people, are you coming to the Moedim? No, because I'm not Hebrew. You can confuse people. But see, people want to confuse people. That's the trick. If you confuse people, then they have to come to you to learn. I don't want to confuse people. It's called Moedim in Hebrew. It means an appointed time. And I'm going to explain to you what it actually means so you can understand what you're coming into. If you've just been recently immersed or you're new to the body, the bride of Yahusha, it's really important these times of the year. Really important. And what does an appointed time mean? As I said, it's Moedim in Hebrew, which means an appointed occasion. Appointed occasion. An enactment and appointment of time. We all know what appointments are. We have appointments day to day. It's something you schedule in. It's something that's got to be, you've got to be there at a certain time. And space, time and space. Getting a bit cosmic now. An appointment of time, space, quantity, labor, and usage. Very specific. It's a commandment. Yes, it is. A custom, a decree, a law, fullness of the moon. That's because the feasts were determined by the moon. They used to look at the moon. The new moon, the umpteenth day of the certain moon, there'd be certain feasts. They used the moon back then to distinguish when the feast was. It's appointed festivals, a fixed time or season, a festival, an assembly. Oh, an assembly. Does that mean you have to come together and put up with other people? I guess so. An assembly is convened for a definite purpose. Not just any purpose, a definite purpose. Technically the congregation, assembly, and by extension, also the place of meeting. All the things you find out when you're filling out your little appointment card. You want to know the time, the date, the place, what's going on. Well, Yahusha's the same. A signal as appointed beforehand. To do this is a signal, an appointed sign and time. A mass of people organised for war. Hang on, we're getting a bit strategic here now, a bit warfare-y. A mass of people organised for war, like an army, a battle, a company, a host, a service, a campaign for hardship and worship. That's what you're signing up to. If you didn't know when you went in the water and came out of it, new heart, new spirit, divine heart operation, incorruptible seed sown within you, you are now signed up for a campaign of hardship and worship. Soldiers waiting upon warfare, waiting for your marching orders from the head, from the chief general. So, what about all that? That gives you an understanding, instead of just saying feast, which we do, we say feast, but now you understand what the depth of what this word really means. It's not just a feast or a festival, it's an appointed time and space. So if you're at the right time at the right place, something amazing is going to happen and you will experience it. And that's what this video, our introduction video, is all about. The experience, how to experience the fullness of Yahusha, not just by reading the words on the page, but what do I have to enter into, even if it's just my belief? What do I have to, how far do I have to stretch myself to experience what Yahusha wants me to experience? So, truly there must be some experience to be had on this most set apart and appointed of times. I hope you understood that. I'm trying to make this really simple. It's a feast time and it's appointed. Yeah, Yahusha sets the times, not us. You can't just gather together 7 times whenever you want. They are based on the moon, and most people have worked that out. And if we're a day out here or there because of modern scientific, the world is round and whatever, if we were a day out, Yahusha understands, but we try and be there at the appointed times, yeah? Because Yahusha is going to do something. So for those who may not even know what the feasts are, there are 7 high Sabbaths, all right? Now, depending on where you've come out of, whether it be Christianity, which don't focus on the feast much at all, they've got their own pagan Christmas, Easter, Valentine's, all those things. Or if you come out of the Jewish movement, Judaism, Orthodox movement, you will see these feasts called different things. And they're very Hebrew, they're very Jewish, they're very hard to understand. There's so many rules upon laws, upon rules, upon laws, upon precepts. We're making this easy. There are 7 high Sabbaths that we are commanded to get together on, okay? 7. So here you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right there. And I'm making it easy. No matter where you've gone or what you've gone through, you might see words come up like Sukkoth and Pesach and Matzah and unleavened bread and all these Hebrew-based words that we don't really need to know much about right now. All you need to know for now is that the first 2 high Sabbaths were the week of Passover. Then 50 days later there was Pentecost, or in Hebrew Shabuoth. Then there was a time when trumpets, atonement, and then a week of tabernacles and a high Sabbath on each end, yeah? So make it easy, guys. Let's make it easy. The power of the feasts is not in the use of confusing Hebrew words. That's not where we get our power and our experience from. The power of the feast is not in the use of confusing Hebrew words and customs, but in the supernatural experience to be had each time. Each time. And it's different from last year. So you can't look back at last year and go, oh, let's just do what we did last year. No, each feast you have a different experience. The power of the feast is not in the use of confusing Hebrew words. I can't stand all these confusing Hebrew words. I know what all they mean. I know what they all mean, but I'm not using them to other people. It's ridiculous. We need to have a supernatural experience. So let's keep going. You'll see a different chart here. There's still 7 feasts. See? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 feasts. You've got the week of Passover here. The lambs are important. The second one was the first fruits. 50 days later was Pentecost. That was at Mount Sinai when the 10 Commandments were given. And then we had a few months, a big gap. Trumpets, shofars blown. Then we had the Day of Atonement, all about the ark and the blood atonement. And then we had a week of booths or sukkahs. Tabernacles, make it easy. Between Pentecost and Tabernacles, between here and here, there was an interval of time of 3 months. These being the 4th, 5th and 6th months. So there's an interval of time around here. Passover and Pentecost were linked together by just a few weeks, weren't they? A few weeks here. But Tabernacles stood alone at the end of the year. See what we're saying? Tabernacles at the end of the year here. And it was separated from the previous feasts by several months. These months were dry months. Remember, all this was agricultural to a farming community. These were the dry months when generally no rain fell. There were no set apart gatherings either for the nation to meet before Yahuah and his sanctuary. So not only was it dry physically in the rain, it would have been dry because they couldn't come and experience the tabernacle. The priests, they would have felt dry spiritually as well. No set apart gatherings to gather before Yahuah and his sanctuary. So there is definite significance in the time lapse between Pentecost and Tabernacles. Between Pentecost and Tabernacles in this dry time here, dark, dry time, not very inspiring time. There's significance in that for us today. Hence, this Feast of Tabernacles is generally recognized as the Feast of Prophecy. That is, a feast which has yet to find complete physical fulfillment in Yahusha. In Israel, no one could experience tabernacles without Pentecost and Passover first. All must follow Yahuah's order in the feasts according to their respective months. No one could experience the last feast without partaking of the first feast first. You couldn't partake of these feasts if you hadn't been living, making offerings and sacrifices all year at each of these other feasts. See? I am going to go into this chart intensively, but not right now. We've got the 7 feasts, there's shadows, there's traditions that people do today, which we need to come out of because they're traditions and they've become dead, really. There's the fulfillments, and the most important part is how we're supposed to behave. And I'll speak about that in a moment. So the main point we're saying right here is there's dry months. Dry months in between here. People were a bit uninspired. And also, you couldn't just experience tabernacles if you hadn't contributed anything all year to all these other feasts, yeah? These agricultural times where you brought animals and sacrifices and spices and all sorts of things, and you lifted up wave sheaves and all sorts of things at each of the other feasts. Likewise, we must all know Yahusha as our master and deliverer and experience him as the Passover lamb who died to cleanse us, destroy our old heart with its corrupt seed, and give us a new heart and spirit. We must experience that before we can ever experience Pentecost and have his new blood covenant written on our new hearts through the planting of the incorruptible seed of his set-apart spirit. Only then can we proceed on in Yahusha to experience the truth of tabernacles maturity. This is true for both Jew and Gentile in Yahusha's new blood covenant. For there can be no feast outside of Yahusha, for everything spoken, shadowed, and prophesied in Scripture finds its life, its meaning, its fulfillment, and completion in him. What did that mean? Yahusha fulfilled Passover in himself as he hung on the torture stake. He fulfilled the end of Passover, which was the first fruits, by offering himself as a spotless, the slain lamb. He waved himself before the Father, or in the heavenly Shamaim, that he was the wave sheaf, the first fruits. And he fulfilled Pentecost because he gave his spirit to all his new bride. He fulfilled that feast as well. But these last few feasts, he's going to fulfill literally, physically himself when he returns. So that's what that's kind of saying. So likewise, we get redeemed by Yahusha's blood. We get new heart and new spirit. We get lifted up and waved before the Father like a wave, a first fruit. We become a first fruit, training in first fruit anyway. And we get the new incorruptible seed of his spirit within us at Pentecost, like what was given on Mount Sinai. The covenant's written on our hearts. That's what that paragraph there was explaining. You must have these experiences here, the first three experiences, before you can even go on to tabernacle truth and experience him in a more deeper depth. Because tabernacles, obviously, what was the tabernacle of Moses and David? It was where Yahusha wanted to dwell. We are now that tabernacle. We are now that temple, our bodies. So in order to experience him moving and training and hearing his voice and everything and redeeming us, transforming us, in order for that to happen, we need to have experienced these first three feasts. Experientially. It's an experience, isn't it? I hope that made sense. I want these videos to be really easy. Yeah? You've got to experience the Passover, experience Pentecost before you can experience the tabernacle feasts. Yeah? They're all an experience. All of this is an experience. Yahusha called his appointed times redemptive feasts. Redemptive feasts. Because when we peel away the old outside layer of agricultural application, which is how he got their attention in their day and age, through farming, sheep, goats, fruit, vegetables, farming, agricultural lifestyle. When we peel away this old outside layer of agricultural application and instruction, we find that all the feasts are a shadow of our deliverance path from darkness to light, from babe to maturity, from foolish to wise and trusted servant, who are feeding his sheep and working his harvest. Did that make sense? It's all a shadow. When we do the feasts, you'll think back maybe last year and go, oh, I'm nothing like I was last year, and the year before that, and the year before that. That's because we are being redeemed. We're going on and on and on into maturity. And so likewise, the way we observe the feasts matures as well. The first year you come across Yahusha, you might literally just do the feasts as the shadows say. You might blow a shofar, you might build a sukkah, because that's what the word says, and you don't know any different. You're just doing what the word says. But as you go on, and you read it and you read it and you go, why am I doing these dead shadows when Yahusha lives inside me? What does he really want me to know at this time of year? What does he really want me to experience? That's where we're coming from here. So, you got to peel away the agricultural application, because they were just to teach a certain people a certain truth. A truth which is eternal. The truth doesn't change. But how does he want to get us, our attention? How does he want to get our attention today? I don't have a farm out the back. I'm not raising sheep or goats or growing fruit and vegetables, so I can't offer that sort of stuff at the feasts. You know, I can't be killing lambs and, you know, on the very basic level of it, I don't have any of that stuff. Does that mean I can't do it? No. What is he trying to show me through all the shadows about sacrifice? What is it I'm supposed to sacrifice? You know, what is it that I'm supposed to offer? What is it, you know, that's supposed to happen at these feasts? So, let's look at this feast time a little bit deeper. The feasts unfulfilled in Israel's wanderings. Paul tells us that most of the things that happened to Israel were for types, examples, and shadow teachings for the new blood covenant fellowship of believers. So they're not null and void, not abolished, because we need all these lessons so that we can not make the same mistakes they made. They're all shadow teachings for us today, his new bride. One of the most remarkable historical types in Israel's history is that which pertains to the set-apart feasts, appointed times of Yahuah. So let's look at what it is. Firstly, let's look at what happened in natural Israel, because she was the first bride. Natural Israel, the historic type and shadow. Israel experienced the feast of Passover in Egypt. Yes, they did. And they experienced the mighty deliverance which resulted there. They understood the concept of the blood and the unleavened bread in their separation from the land of bondage through immersion into the Red Sea and the cloud. What's everything you got to look at spiritually, supernaturally, guys? What is our separation from the land of bondage through immersion in the Red Sea and the cloud? What was our immersion? In water. That was our separation, where we leave the old man, the old person at the bottom of the water, and we rise up a new creation. Yeah? Separated from Egyptian slavery, from the Pharaoh, from all the bondage that we were kept in. Satan controlled us. See how we've also had this experience? If you've experienced Passover in this way, everything Israel experienced in the natural, we are to experience supernaturally. The journey brought them, Israel, to the foot of Mount Sinai, where the nation then experienced the feast of Pentecost in the 3rd month. Yahuwah's intention was then to bring Israel into the land promised to Abraham over 500 years prior. The promised land was the land of Canaan. He wanted to take them straight there, where they could enter into the 3rd and final Feast of Tabernacles and partake of the land's first fruit, partake of the rains, the blessings of peace, security, comfort, and have a home of their own. That's what he promised Abraham, because all of the Hebrews had been kind of gypsy sojourners their whole life and existence until they'd gone into Egyptian slavery. So this was the fulfillment of the promises given to Abraham. They were supposed to experience the Passover, and they did. They were supposed to experience the Pentecost, and they did. The 10 Commandments being given, the wedding vows being handed out. Will you obey me? Will you listen to my voice? If you will listen, if you will that, you will not have the same plagues. That if you will do all this. And they said, yes, everything you command, we will do. And then they were supposed to go and experience tabernacles. In Egypt, Israel knew and experienced the Passover lamb, the blood and unleavened bread. At Mount Sinai, they knew and experienced the marriage covenant at Pentecost. They experienced it. But only in the promised land of Canaan could they know and experience and enjoy tabernacles. Where's the promised land today? Got to remember all this stuff today. Where's the promised land? Is it Israel? Like all the geopolitical arguments and conflicts going on in the world? No, promised land's right here in your heart. Your body is the temple. The whole purpose for the promised land was to have his presence in the temple there. The promised land. So, only in the promised land of Canaan could they know and experience and enjoy tabernacles. The great tragedy is seen when the nation came to Kadesh Barnea, and there Yahuwah's chosen son Israel rejected the land promised to his fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Remember the story of the 12 spies? And in rejecting the land of Canaan, he also rejected the greatest feast, the Feast of Tabernacles. So they didn't go into the land, so they never experienced it. Not for 40 years anyway. For 40 years, Yahuwah allowed Israel to wander in the wilderness until all that generation died out. Only Joshua and Caleb lived to enter into the land of Canaan with the new generation. 2 people, 2 of the older generation, first generation Israel, only 2. He waited until all of them were died out. And the national sin, of course, was that of unbelief. They didn't believe. How many people today do not believe in having Messiah, Yahusha, within in such a supernatural capacity to be able to experience him like this? That's the problem. It is evident that the new generation, after crossing the Jordan, they kept the Feast of Yahuah. So the new generation experienced Passover. The new generation experienced Pentecost and also Tabernacles. Joshua and Caleb, as overcomers, also enjoyed the feasts of Yahuah in Canaan land at the end of the 40 years wanderings in the wilderness. They had a kind of rebirth, a kind of refreshment of spirit. They were rebirthed, refreshed in spirit, and they wholly followed Yahuah. That same rebirth, that same bringing back, re-establishing the assembly, the bridal covenant, everything, that same rebirth is now being established again today in Yahusha's new covenant assemblies. Israel's been divorced. You won't find her anywhere. They're done. He's raised up a new covenant, incorporating all of them if they want to. So, it's not null and void. They can be joined if they want to. But you're joined to Yahusha, in the new covenant assemblies. So that was Israel in the natural Israel, the first bride, the historical type and the shadow. This is what went down. So let's have a look at Yahusha's new supernatural bride, the historic fulfillment. The old blood covenant scene may be superimposed upon the history of the new blood covenant bridal fellowship in remarkable comparison. Everything that happened in the old blood covenant may be superimposed onto the new. Share the experience. The historical books of the new blood covenant writers show the fulfillment of the first two feasts beautifully. They've taught us how the first two feasts were fulfilled. It's mainly in the Gospels and the Acts. The four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they present Yahusha as the historic fulfillment of the Feast of Passover and the sheaf of first fruits, while the book of Acts shows remarkably the historical fulfillment of the Feast of Weeks, Pentecost, in the bridal fellowship. But where in the history of the New Covenant bride can one find the fulfillment of the third and final feast, the Feast of Tabernacles? Where? Understanding this? I hope this isn't too confusing. Passover. Yahusha fulfilled Passover. He died on the torture stake. Came and died for the sins of his bride. He did that. And then his body was waved up in the heavenly sanctuary. He presented his blood. He fulfilled. He rose from the dead and was ascended. And Pentecost is where, at the beginning of the book of Acts, just like in Sinai when the fire came down, that fire came onto all the heads, making them all little individual temples and tabernacles of his presence, little portal presence people, temple people, That happened there. So these have been fulfilled. That's what that text was saying. But where do we find these feasts fulfilled? That's why these feasts are a bit more confusing, because they haven't been literally fulfilled yet. But you can celebrate them as though they have, because Yahusha's alive in you. So let's have a look. Where can we find the latter feasts fulfilled? This is the one remaining feast of prophecy. The feast not quite fully fulfilled in the bridal fellowship yet. Not yet. The fact remains that the Feast of Tabernacles is the only shadow in the old blood covenant which has not yet been fully fulfilled by Yahusha physically. He's fulfilling it now supernaturally, but he hasn't fulfilled it physically yet, though he is indeed alive inside us. The new blood covenant bride must follow the patterns given to the old blood covenant bride. The patterns, nothing wrong with the patterns, nothing wrong with the instructions, the Torah, the commandments, nothing wrong with any of that. We have to follow the same patterns, otherwise we will fail and be divorced like the first bride, won't we? First the natural, first the earthly, then the supernatural, spiritual. First the type, then the antitype. First the shadow, then the substance. Everything of old was to teach us how to behave. He used all the things in their natural existence of agriculture to teach them how he wanted them to live, their lifestyle, how to behave. And now today, He's using things in our life today to show us. All day, every day, he's showing you. But are you paying attention? As natural Israel wandered for 40 years after Passover and Pentecost, the experience they had, and failed to enter into tabernacles in Canaan through unbelief, so the new covenant bridal assembly has followed suit and has been wandering, so to speak, through history in so much unbelief of Yahuwah's promises. Generations have passed on, dying in the wilderness, never experiencing Yahusha's supernatural presence. What about this? Just as Israel wandered for 40 years, the assembly, which pretty much died out, has been wandering through history for nearly 2,000 years. Through conflicting ideas and discord, the early assemblies lost their lampstands. They lost the presence of Yahusha and ushered in nearly 2,000 years of dark ages, only to be revived in recent years. It's only starting to come to light today about the truth, this supernatural experience that you can have. But most still refuse to accept that there's even a new covenant. What about that? If we accept there's a new covenant, that means we're being Christians. No, we're not. Christians are pagans. They're just the modern day sun worshippers. This has nothing to do with Christianity. And it's got nothing to do with old Hebrew Jewishness either, because they've built big walls around their doctrines and won't let anybody know the truth either. The truth is that there's a supernatural experience to be had. It is not that this third feast is not dealt with in the new blood covenant writings, because it is a lot. So even though it hasn't been fulfilled physically yet by Yahusha, it's still dealt with a lot in the new blood covenant. Hebrews and Revelation especially deal with this Feast of Tabernacles and its integral parts. However, Yahuah has kept the fullness of this feast for the end time generations, who will wholeheartedly believe and follow him and enter into his promises. Those who will wholeheartedly believe and follow him and not get caught up and distracted by all those carpetbaggers around them selling their wares. The old covenant bride, the nation of Israel, they wandered for 40 years in the wilderness of dead unbelief, with very little to no supernatural experience. Not in that 40 years. They just had problem after problem after problem. Yes, he supernaturally sustained them. That was supernatural. But likewise, the new covenant bride has been wandering for approximately 40 jubilees, which is 2,000 years. They've been wandering in the same dead wilderness of unbelief. But the wilderness wanderings are now ending. A new generation is arising. They are supernaturally experiencing Yahusha as their Passover lamb, being cleansed in his blood, literally, physically, everything, supernaturally experiencing Yahusha, being cleansed in his blood. They are supernaturally experiencing the feast of Pentecost by having not only his instructions written on their new hearts, but a supernatural love for Yahusha and their neighbor, which is the new commandment that he gave to us. Remember? Love one another as I have loved you. Love Yahuah your Elohim. Love your neighbor as yourself. So not only are they getting the 10 commandments, the Torah, the old laws written on their hearts, Yahusha came and refreshed them and said, love one another. But they couldn't do that back then. They didn't have the supernatural power. They didn't have the seeds of the Spirit within them. So, we're given also a supernatural love for Yahusha and their neighbor, a new commandment, which are brought to life by his set-apart Spirit. And they won't just stop there, but will move on and on to exercise and supernaturally experience the maturity and set-apartness of the Feast of Tabernacles and all the truths shadowed within it. That's what Tabernacles really represents, maturity. The maturity of having Messiah within you. There is a strong force standing in the doorway to stop the people from going up to Jerusalem, because that was the command, all the males over a certain age had to go up to Jerusalem to observe these feasts on the high Sabbaths. Today, likewise, there's a strong force standing in the doorway to stop people from going up to Jerusalem, within, of course, to observe the feast in sincerity, spirit, and truth. But all immersed believers in Yahusha's name have direct access to the throne room of the divine Zion, the heavenly Jerusalem, where one greater than Solomon sits on the throne in all esteem and authority in the royal city of David. But we must enter through our belief, not into the earthly, natural, dead shadows of Israel, as the dragon wants us to and desires. We don't enter into that. We enter into the divine, supernatural experience of Yahusha's loving kindness and joy. Now, what did all that mean? We've got Solomon and Zion and the city of David and Jerusalem. If that was a bit confusing to you, I'm about to make your life a whole lot easier. Whenever you read the scripture and you see these words, you no longer have to be confused, because this is what happened and this is what we do today, all right? The old covenant that was raised up many times with many different men and formally written in stone around the time of Moses, that was all based on animal blood. It was given to a bride, the first bride, who was Israel. He used bride Israel, who were the 12 tribes of Jacob, Israel. And they were promised a land of Canaan. Yeah? Within that promised land of Canaan, there was a capital city of Jerusalem. Jerusalem. Or David called it Zion, the city of David. Yeah? When he conquered it. The whole purpose of having that capital city was to have a temple. The whole purpose of the temple was to have his presence. So let's stop there for a moment and have a look. In Yahusha's new covenant, it's a new covenant because of new blood. New power has come to the scene. He's given a new bride, new blood, all immersed in Yahusha. Where is this new Jerusalem? It's going to come from the clouds one day. But where is it today? Where is it forming today? Whenever you look in the scripture and see Jerusalem or Zion or city of David, that's the local fellowship of believers. That's who we are, the assembly, the bridal assembly. How do we know that? Because the temple was in the capital city. The temple was in Jerusalem. The temple, we know, is our body, individuals. The temple was, and where was the temple? The temple, all our little temples are gathering in the local fellowship. Now, the temple back then had a high priest, Aaron, but our high priest is Yahusha. And he actually lives within us. He's tending to our temples, just as Aaron tended. And Yahusha is the Melchizedek priesthood. And the whole purpose of having the temple was to have that most set apart place where the ark sat. And that ark is our heart, where the presence is, the interdimensional portal that connected the dimensions in that little space, in that little square, in the tent, tabernacle, and then in the temple of Solomon, the interdimensional portal, a place where heaven and earth were connected. Yeah? That place is now within our hearts. Incense stands for prayers. The showbread, the table of showbread, the bread is the living word. The lampstand stands for his presence. That's why he said, I'll take your lampstands away if you don't obey me. It's his presence. Priestly garments. We don't wear priestly garments. We put on our armor, don't we? The armor of Yahusha. Got to put your armor on every day. The brazen laver was where they washed. That's the immersion. The brazen altar was where the sacrifices happened. Our repentance. They sacrifice animals. We sacrifice ourselves every single day. Throw your flesh onto the altar. Offer up the bulls of your lips, your behavior. You're behaving how he wants you to behave. Worship. You no longer go to a building to worship. Though we love to gather and praise Yahusha, we don't go to worship. We worship all day, every day, 24/7 through our behavior. There were 10 main commandments back here. Now we're told to love one another, which incorporates all those commands anyway. Back then they had limited access. Today we have direct access. This is a way to troubleshoot you through all the older scriptures so you no longer have to be confused. Whenever you see these words in the scripture, you know that it's talking about you in your life, in your physical existence here, but also supernaturally in your assembly. Because you should be in one, you should be gathering. Leviticus sets out the 3 parts of this feast of the 7th month. This is the feasts of the 7th month. These 4 here, feasts of the 7th month. Let's read them so we can have a look at what the actual text says and how we should interpret it today. Number 1, the Feast of Trumpets. That's this one here. Or in Hebrew, it is Yom Teruah, which is just a shout, day of the shout. If you don't have a trumpet, you shout. That's what they did back then. Feast of Trumpets. Leviticus 23 says, "Speak to the children of Israel, saying, in the 7th month, on the 1st day of the month, you have a rest day, a remembrance of blowing of trumpets, a set-apart assembly." Means you've got to assemble together. "You do no servile work, no working that day. And you shall bring an offering made by fire to Yahuah." What kind of offering do we have to make by fire? I don't know about you, but have you been through the fire of Yahusha's testing daily to produce a different kind of behavior? Offering yourself on the altar of the flesh has to die. That's the offering you're bringing, not just on the feast day, every day of the year. Offering made by fire, it certainly is. Judgment starts in the house of Yahuah, and it burns. If you do the wrong thing with Yahusha's spirit in you, consequences get heaped on you big time, and it burns, doesn't it? This is the fire. So by presenting yourself on that day into the assembly, you're bringing an offering, yourself and the behavior that you have. That's the Feast Day of Trumpets. The next day was the Feast Day of Atonement, which was 10 days later. Or in Hebrew, it's Yom Kippur, not Yom Kippur, Yom Kippur, which just meant covering, atonement. We keep it easy, English here. Leviticus 23 says, on the 10th day of the 7th month is the Day of Atonement. Atonement just means forgiveness of sins, covering through blood. It shall be a set-apart assembly for you. Here we go, assembly again. And you shall afflict your beings. Afflict your beings is another way of saying to fast from food. And you shall bring an offering made by fire. Well, we've dealt with the offering made by fire. That's you. That's you, who you are right now. You're offering who you are to Yahuah. You do no work, because it's a Sabbath. A law forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings. It's a law forever. So forever and ever. Forever means forever, forever and ever. It is a Sabbath of rest to you. So you rest. And you shall afflict your beings. On the 9th day of the month at evening, from evening to evening, you observe your Sabbath. All right? Afflict your beings. So does he want us to just not eat food for one day? Because, I've been doing intermittent fasting for months now. I don't eat all day every day. I only have like one meal at dinner time. So there's nothing supernatural about it. I'm just trying to get healthy and lose weight. Like, there's nothing like supernatural about that, apart from the fact that your body is the temple and you've got to look after it. But like, afflict your being. What does that mean to us today? You've got Yahusha's spirit in you, hopefully. What do you think Yahusha's saying to you? You think he just merely wants you to fast on one day? Yes, because fasting brings you closer to Yahuah. No, it doesn't. It just brings you closer to being aggravated, and ticked off. That's what it brings you closer to. It just makes you angry. So the afflicting of your being today is all day, every day, afflicting your flesh, putting off the flesh. Anybody from any religion can have a fast day, but nobody in any religion, only those with Yahusha within them, can put off their flesh, can die to themselves for the sake of someone else, to want to flow with Yahusha and have a supernatural experience with him. Only in Yahusha can you do that. That's why this is significant, a supernatural experience. If you want to do the 24-hour fast and that's it for you, fine, because it says it in the text. Great. I want to have a supernatural experience all day, every day. And this is where the choice comes in. You can either read the letter of the law and do what the shadow says, what he's saying to them here, which was 4,000 years ago. Or you can have a supernatural experience today. Then we have the Feast of Tabernacles, which are these two here. In Hebrew, it's Sukkoth. Booths, another word. But tabernacles is easier. We know what a tabernacle is and what it was for. The Feast of Tabernacles, on the 15th day of the 7th month, is the Festival of Tabernacles for 7 days to Yahuah. On the first day is a set-apart assembly. You do no servile work. For 7 days you bring an offering made by fire. We know what that is. Bring yourself, come as you are. You've been going through the fire, bring it with you. The experience. On the 8th day there shall be a set-apart assembly for you, and you shall bring another offering made by fire to Yahuah. It is a closing festival. You do no servile work in that day either. So on the first day of Tabernacles and on the 8th day you do no work. They're both high Sabbaths. On the first day is a rest, and on the 8th day a rest. And you, on the first day, you shall take the fruit of good trees, branches of palm trees, twigs of leafy trees, and willows of the stream, and shall rejoice before Yahuah your Elohim for 7 days. What's the most important part of that sentence there? Oh, it's the palm trees and the twigs of the leafy trees. You can't do it without doing it. No, it's the word rejoice, because you can do that without any branches. What if you don't have any branches? What if you live in the inner city with not a tree in sight? Does that mean you can't do the feast? See how ridiculous people can be today? It's got nothing to do with anything agricultural or anything physical, really. This is a supernatural experience. How can I observe this feast? Well, I can rejoice. I can do that. Yeah. Rejoice before Yahuah your Elohim for 7 days. Well, actually, we're called to rejoice all day, every day, aren't we? Rejoice in sorrows, rejoice in sufferings, count it all joy, the trials you're going through. Everything's supposed to be counted joy. So it's not just for this feast. It's for all time. This is a law forever in your generation. So we must observe the high Sabbath. We must come together on the high Sabbath. If there's anybody around, I mean, if you don't know anybody and there's no one around, don't give yourself, a hard time about that. But you could start your own assembly and wait on Yahusha to draw people. That's what we did. So he starts from nothing and he forms an assembly. Start your own assembly and gather together with whoever you've got, even if it's just you and your husband or wife. Gather together. Observe it for 7 days. Law of all generations. Dwell in booths for 7 days. You're going to build a sukkah and dwell in a booth for 7 days? All who are native Israelites. Well, I'm not a native Israelite. But as the scripture says, as Paul says, all who are in Yahusha are the seed of Abraham. So I am the seed of Abraham through Yahusha. But I'm not dwelling in a booth because Yahusha dwells in me, in my booth already. Yahusha dwells in me. So why would I go and dwell in a physical booth when he already dwells in my booth? See how ridiculous this gets? Why would I dwell in a tabernacle that I've made myself, some pathetic excuse for a dwelling, when he is dwelling in my dwelling? Because of course it's a reminder. All these things were for reminders, because these people only had a physical experience, an agricultural experience, and they were so steeped in idolatry that he used everything that he had at his disposal. Palm branches, blood, lambs, animals, tzitzits, everything, to try and get their attention, to remember the covenant, remember the commandments. And that's what it was. It's a remembrance when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am Yahuah your Elohim. I don't need to be reminded of me being brought out of Egypt, because if I ever look behind me and try and step back into Egypt, if I ever try and do something that's idolatrous, look at something that I'm not supposed to look at, or, think about something I'm not supposed to think about, that's idolatry, and I get flogged. So I don't need a constant reminder. I have him living within my tabernacle, living within my living dwelling, living within my temple, reminding me constantly. I don't need all these outward signs and shadows to remind me, because he is in my mind, my heart, my vessel, all day, every day. So, other scriptures dealing with the more intricate details of the sacrificial feast offerings may be found in Numbers 29, while Leviticus 16 goes into greater detail regarding the Day of Atonement, the priests, the blood, and the mercy seat. And of course, the book of Hebrews explains who all these shadow observances were pointing to and where they find their ultimate fulfillment, at the feet of Yahusha himself. It's all about Yahusha. I mean, if the religion of Orthodox Judaism can observe these feasts and not believe in Yahusha, what does that say about the feasts that they're observing? There's got to be another experience to be had if you're in Yahusha. In Numbers 10 it says, "And in the day of your gladness, and in your appointed times, and at the beginning of your months, you shall blow the trumpets over your burnt offerings and over your intimate peace offerings. And they shall be a remembrance for you before you, your Elohim Yahuah." Trumpets were blown all the time. At the new moons, at the Sabbaths, at the appointed times. Anytime there was a festival or a conquering, a rejoicing, anything, bring out the trumpets. That was how they celebrated. Do you need to bring out a trumpet or a ram's horn today? Why? Can't you get everybody's attention? Can't you send everybody a text? Can't you ring them up and find out when they're coming to this? Can't you put on some great music and have a celebration? Why do you need to blow trumpets? See how today it's a bit weird to be doing this shadow stuff? The Feast Time of Tabernacles, historical and prophetically. There has been a historic shadow and fulfillment of Passover and also of Pentecost. But while there has been many shadows, there has not been a complete historic fulfillment of tabernacles by Yahusha yet. Although we can certainly see how Yahusha arriving on this earth to tabernacle or booth among us in his human physical flesh, in such humility, for the ultimate purpose of atonement from sin, was in itself the greatest trumpet blast announcement, wasn't it? A truth now echoed and shining within his new bride. So while he hasn't physically fulfilled these feasts yet, these latter feasts, he did tabernacle among us for the purpose of atonement, and that was a mighty trumpet blast, wasn't it? Consistency of interpretation demands that this feast, as the previous two, also find historic fulfillment. Not only must there be a historic fulfillment by Yahusha physically in himself, which will come when he returns, there must also be an experiential fulfillment in his bridal people. That's happening now. That's the reviving of his bride today, bringing her back into this new supernatural experience. The historic shadow fulfillment pointed to the historic experiential fulfillment. The historic shadow fulfillment pointed to the historic experiential fulfillment, of which we're part of today. We're experiencing this today. As this feast is studied, it will be seen that certain elements in this feast have indeed been fulfilled historically in Yahusha and his work of deliverance. But the full truth shadowed has to also find its fulfillment in the maturity, in the deliverance experience of the bride also. Hence, in studying the details of this final feast, it is necessary to clearly understand and abstractly discern that which Yahusha has already fulfilled, and that this has to be fulfilled in his new bridal assembly also. Not only did Yahusha fulfill stuff, we need to fulfill it, because we're his body. And it's important to understand that which is historic and that which is prophetic. Otherwise, misunderstanding and misinterpretation will result, won't it? The challenge then comes to all believers as to which feast they will stop at. Which experience will they stop at? Stop at Passover? Will you stop at Pentecost? Or will you go on to tabernacle maturity? Which are you going to stop at? Many people are claiming the blood of the Lamb, aren't they? Many people today won't even accept that Yahuwah came in the flesh as a man to deliver his bride. They still think there's two people, Yahuwah and Yahusha. They won't even accept that. So, assembly history shows how Yahuwah's people have stopped at either the first feast or the second feast. Yahusha's bride, both wise and foolish, have built their many groups and Natsar messianic movements around the various truths of these two feasts, haven't they? Various truths of these two feasts, the Passover and the Pentecost, the having the Spirit within you. They've built their many beliefs around those things, having the true name. All these movements are based around those things. But what about going on to tabernacle maturity? Many of these groups have built their various movements, but then they've allowed the surrounding religions, the surrounding cultures and shadow traditions to seep into the mixture, swill of their worship behaviour, completely extinguishing the supernatural experience in exchange for dead shadows. Got that? Completely extinguishing the supernatural experience in exchange for dead shadows. What are the dead shadows? All these things here, look at them all. This is what people do at feast times. It's completely dead. All of this stuff is dead. They're not having a real supernatural experience with Yahusha. The sad history of the assembly shows that those who experienced Passover truths violently opposed those who went on to experience Pentecost truths. And those who have experienced Pentecost truths now oppose those who seek to keep going and follow on to tabernacle, maturity, supernatural truth and experience, to know Yahusha moment by moment in all fullness of his indwelt portal tabernacle truth. Understand that? People opposing it. What does this mean for you? So while this is just an introduction, guys, I think you can see already that these shadow, liturgical, dead works are not required at Yahusha's feasts anymore, because all the things that happened in the shadows in the scriptures represented something for us to do today. They had to be fulfilled, not only in Yahusha, but in his bride, the experience she's having. So while you might say he hasn't come back to fully fulfill them yet, no, but we can be fulfilling them because he's within us. Do you understand that? He's fulfilling them through us. He is transforming his bride to become as he wants her to become. So these feasts we will go through, that's long enough now. These feasts we will go through one by one, and I'll explain all these things to you. Because when you come to the feast, if this is the only video that you do watch, when you come to the feast, the supernatural redemptive experience is the most important thing that you go through. And when you first come to Yahusha, you're redeemed by his blood. You have a new heart and spirit through immersion. The incorruptible seed of his spirit is sown within you, just like what happened on the day of Pentecost. Then we go on, the day of trumpets, we're trained to be ready for his return. Just like a trumpet sounding. He's constantly blowing a trumpet in your ear, getting your attention. Get ready. He's training us. On the day of atonement, when we must afflict our being, that stands for our flesh must die for us to overcome. The flesh, putting off the flesh. Then, the booths, the tabernacles, the Feast of Tabernacles. Our body is the temple of his portal. Our body is the temple of his presence. That's what it stands for. That's what we have to know. And then the last great day of the feast was a great day of joy and celebration in Yahusha. That's what you go through when you first come into Yahusha and you're immersed. As you go on there, there's a supernatural redemptive experience to be had. Let's look at what that is. What did Yahusha want you to focus on when you come into the feast this year? First off, Yahusha cleanses us as we put off all leaven habits. We don't have to, at Passover, not eat literal leaven, try and sweep all the leaven and flowers out of our home. No, we don't have to not eat leaven. That's ridiculous. Not eat yeast, because that's a behaviour. Yahusha cleanses us as we put off all leaven habits. You understand that? Likewise, at the Feast of First Fruits, which is the last within the Passover week, Yahusha's alive. We don't have to be waving first fruits and doing all the waving barley. Yahusha is alive, preparing us as his first fruit bride. That's what you've got to go into the feast understanding. Likewise, at Pentecost, Yahushua writes his new covenant love on our hearts. Love one another as I have loved you. That's what he's trying to achieve in his assembly. His love. That's what you're going into this feast knowing. And then as we come into trumpets in a couple of weeks, Yahushua always gets our attention like a trumpet blast. Isn't he getting our attention like a trumpet blast? That's what you've got to know going in there. What are you trying to get my attention about, Yahushua? What are you trying to get my attention about? He's doing it all day, every day, whether you accept it or not. So you might as well get involved. Then when it comes to atonement, Day of Atonement, you don't have to fast from food and drink on the Day of Atonement, because Yahushua is judging his bride to inflict her flesh and die every day. That's what that was a shadow of. That's what that was a shadow of. Not just fasting one day a year, fasting from your flesh, putting it off. The selfishness, the arrogance, the ego, the flesh, put it off all day, every day. Coming into booths, you don't have to cut down tree branches and build a sukkah. You don't have to do all that. Yahushua wants to completely possess us as his temple. The seed is planted. He's in us if you allow him. But he wants to grow, possess our whole vessel. He wants to completely possess us as his temple. That's what you need to know going into the first feast, the first Sabbath, High Sabbath, Tabernacles. And then the last one, the marriage crown of celebration and life is given to the overcomer. You can start experiencing that right now too. Not just the great joy when he returns. You can start experiencing that great joy now if you overcome. All these things are given to the overcomer. The marriage crown, the crown of life and celebration. You can have it now. So the feasts are a part of our redemption training. So the appointed times must be observed. We must observe them, just like the weekly Sabbath. Yes, Yahushua is our rest, and we can rest in him all day, every day. We have rest and peace, that's great. But there's still a cycle of sevens to consider. Work 6 days, rest the 7th. That's not a pagan Babylonian calendar thing. No, that's a creation week thing. That's something Yahushua did in creation. He worked 6 days, he rested on the 7th. And even when they came out of Egypt, and they were steeped and full of idolatry, the first thing he did was get them back into the pattern of 7 days a week, work 6 days, rest on the 7th. Nothing gets your attention more than starving and having to collect your food, is it? He got them back into the 7-day cycle. No civilization has been able to get rid of the 7-day cycle. They've tried, but they can't. Nothing to do with paganism. Days of the week today are all based on paganism, but the fact that there's a 7-day cycle and you've got to rest on the 7th day, which is the Saturday, that's scriptural. These feasts are scriptural. They're part of our redemption training, so they must be observed. However, to abstractly and genuinely discern and acknowledge and remember the body and blood of Yahusha, vital, and his work of delivering his bride, in order for that to happen, we must not simply and blindly do the shadow teachings given as though some rigid formula or liturgy, so that we can feel good about ourselves and that we've done the right thing because it's written in the text. No, because they were for an agricultural-based society. But we must study, listen, ask Yahushua to reveal to us personally. Ask Yahushua to reveal to us personally what each shadow meant and what truth it teaches us today, so we can fully experience him in each feast. This has to be a revelation to your heart from him. Don't go trying to get affirmation from anyone else around you. That's like trying to get blood out of a stone, trying to put work out into the world and get people, oh, that's great, I can feel that in my spirit, I agree with that. No, you'll generally get spat on. And I'm talking about Yahusha's bride. That's the state the bride's in. They can't be told anything. So if you're receiving something divinely, supernaturally from Yahushua, enjoy it. Don't stop putting it out there, but just don't be discouraged when nobody receives it. Because Yahushua told me All the work we're doing now is for the future. Because people each year that they do the feasts over and over again, they start getting tired of the shadows, they start seeing how dead the shadows are, and they start looking for the way out. And that's what all these videos are for, to show them, yeah? We're trailblazing here at the Behaviour Evolution, just giving you what Yahusha gives us. And if you're not ready to receive them yet and you want to still do it like you did it last year, that's fine. But there's a much deeper experience to be had, a supernatural experience in Yahusha, in each feast. And the main thing you need to know going into each feast is, what's Yahusha getting your attention about this year? And how is he doing it? We know how he got their attention back there. It's all written down. Agricultural, how he got their attention. It would be hard not to have their attention, having to do all that labor, painstaking work and sacrificing animals and whatnot. How's he getting your attention this year? What's he want you to know going into this Feast of Trumpets? This is just the introduction. Our next video will actually be about the Feast of Trumpets. I'll do that next week. So what's he blasting about in your ear? What's the trumpet blasting in your ear about? Yeah? Stay strong, brothers and sisters, and start getting excited, because we're in the feast season of tabernacles. Woohoo!
Bubbly, 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 bubbly. Make the trumpets blow.
Entre las piedras de chipiona del paro. Y cuando entro en el restaurante me ve el cocinero con una paellera que adentro la vende paellera. ¡Ándale, mira dónde llega el agua!
Man, no stop watch when you bubbly, bubbly. Serious thing, it and a comedy, comedy. Man, them say you have the comedy, comedy. So me won't get someone come trouble, trouble. Bust two buckle of the bubbly, bubbly. Call in two friend and then double, double. Girl so hot, she a bubbly, bubbly. And she know when she got, she a carry me remedy. Body look good, girl, you ever be winning it. Turn it up right, girl, you never be dimming it. Shake up your body, cause you're in your element. Pon your body, me take up a permanent residence.
With the final blast, the ups and downs of a really long day come to a full stop. It's chow time. Time to eat as Jews gather together for break the fast.
Make the trumpets blow.
Jews around the world celebrate the holiday of Passover, or Pesach, a commemoration of the biblical story of a ritual feast on the first night of Passover spent around the table, retelling and reflecting on the story of the Israelites' salvation from slavery in Egypt, with prayers, songs, food, and lots of wine. But no two Seders are exactly alike.
It's time for the matzah feast. It's time for the matzah feast. Ain't got no raisin yeast. Ain't got no raisin yeast. Gonna dip some parsley. Gonna dip it twice to see. Cause you know that he split the sea and he set my people free.
Here to talk about wines for the Seder.
Exactly.
And I'm here with
Pesach is coming.
I'm here with my good friend Gabe.
We're going to drink a lot of wine. That's one of the big mitzvot of Pesach, of the Pesach Seder, is to drink those 4 cups of wine. So it's a lot of wine. You don't want something that's too heavy. So I decided to choose here to start with rosé, which is pretty lighter in alcohol also than most other dry wines.
Why is this distilled product kosher for Pesach?
Okay, so that's a great question, Jay. Cognac is a grape brand. It's distilled from grapes. Because it's distilled, the halacha is that you make a she'akol. You don't, the bracha, the blessing on cognac is she'akol. It's not borei piragafen.
You know what has a nice, sweet, almost caramel aroma?
And you should know that Louis Royer is one of the most famous, one of the most prestigious cognac houses in France.
Well, L'chaim,
L'chaim,
this has been
enjoy.
actually a lot of fun.
Always a lot of fun with you.
A bit of a free-for-all. Before the singing starts, guests pass around large green onions and whack each other with the stems. In case you were wondering, why?
I've cleaned the house and got rid of the chametz. Now the Seder's where I go. Me and my fam at the table eating matzah like the Hebrews long ago. So come over, we start Passover Seder by blessing the wine, and we washing our hands. Then we grab the parsley, dip it in the salt water, and break the middle matzah in half.
And now singing like, girl, you know I want matzah. Matzah was handmade by my father before me. Thanking God that we were freed, let out of slavery in Mitzrayim. Say, boys, now we'll drink 4 cups, spill 4 the plates, and go on with the magid. Thanking God that we were freed, thanking God that we were freed.
Feeling love from my Seder crew. Gonna rock out the Dayenu. Chagad Yahuah and Nadiru. Next year in YISHARAL. Tonight family fills the room, and the kitchen smells like soup. For 8 days we're saying thank you to God who took us out of Mitzrayim. He took us out of Mitzrayim. For 8 days we're saying thank you to God who took us out of Mitzrayim.
Should again before the meal can begin, and eat the matzah our forefathers ate. They had to leave swiftly, no time to add yeast. Now we've got unleavened bread on the plate. Take a bite of the marrow so we remember the horrors of our lives as the Egyptians slaves. And for roasted to that we put it on matzah and then eat Hillel sandwich, then Shulchan Aruch.
And we're singing like, girl, you know I want matzah. Matzah was handmade by my father before me. Thanking God that we were freed, let out of slavery in Mitzrayim. Say, boys, now we'll drink 4 cups, spit 4 the plates, and go on with the magid. Thanking God that we were freed, thanking God that we were freed.
Feeling love from the Seder crew. Gonna rock out the Dayenu. Chagad Yahuah and Nadiru. Next year in YISHARAL. Tonight family fills the room, and the kitchen smells like soup. For 8 days we're saying thank you to God who took us out of Mitzrayim. He took us out of Mitzrayim. He took us out of Mitzrayim. He took us out of Mitzrayim. Dayenu and Chagad Yahuah and Nadiru. I'm feeling love from my Seder crew. Come on to the Seder. Come on to the Seder.
Hay que hacerlo más siguiente ahora, con los 2 tacos de llama más bebida, llámate bebida.
Come on to the Seder, come on. I'm feeling love from the Seder crew. Gonna rock at the Dayenu. Chagad Yahuah and Nadiru. Next year in YISHARAL. Tonight family fills the room, and the kitchen smells like soup. For 8 days we're saying thank you to God who took us out of Mitzrayim. Took us out of Mitzrayim.
crew.
That cracks me up.